March 11, 2011. Without warning, the ground beneath northern Japan convulsed with a force so immense it shifted the entire main island 8 feet to the east and knocked Earth's axis off course. In minutes, what began as the world's fourth largest recorded earthquake set in motion a tsunami towering over city seawalls, followed by nuclear meltdowns and the deadliest day Japan has known in generations. But how did a nation famed for disaster preparedness become helpless against nature's fury? The answer began deep beneath the sea. At 2:46 p.m. Japan Standard Time, a fault line stretching 500 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean snapped. The rupture tore through the Earth's crust, releasing unprecedented energy on a scale rarely seen in human history. Seismometers across the region registered a magnitude 9.0, Japan's strongest recorded quake and the fourth largest ever measured worldwide. In a matter of seconds, the boundary between two tectonic plates shifted, driving the Pacific Plate under the Okhotsk Plate. The movement forced the seafloor up by several meters and unleashed shockwaves that raced through the ground. Towns and cities from Hokkaido to Tokyo shook for nearly 6 minutes. Buildings swayed, roads cracked open, and power lines whipped in the air. Across the entire Tohoku region, people struggled to stay on their feet as the ground rolled beneath them. Satellite data later revealed that Honshu, Japan's largest island, had moved 2.4 meters east. Even the planet itself was affected. The redistribution of mass shifted Earth's axis by up to 25 centimeters and slightly sped up its rotation. As seismologist Kenji Satake later explained, a 9.0 rupture moved Honshu 2.4 meters and shifted Earth's axis. That is how much energy was released. The scale of this event set off a chain of consequences that would reach far beyond the epicenter. Satellite data captured a transformation on a planetary scale. Honshu, the main island of Japan, shifted 2.4 meters east in less than a minute. GPS stations across the country recorded this sudden movement with astonishing precision, their data points jumping as the crust itself lurched beneath them. The energy released by the quake was so immense that it redistributed the planet's mass, tilting Earth's axis by nearly 10 centimeters. Even the planet's rotation sped up, a fraction of a microsecond per day. For scientists, these measurements rewrote the limits of what a single earthquake could do, not just to a coastline, but to the very mechanics of the world. The seafloor's abrupt rise forced billions of tons of water upward, loading the Pacific with enough force to set the next disaster in motion. In the hours that followed, the consequences of this jolt would surge outward, far beyond the reach of any fault line. Just minutes after the quake, the Pacific heaved upward, sending a wave racing toward Japan's coast. In Miyako, survey teams would later measure the water's run up at over 40 meters, higher than a 10-story building and the tallest ever recorded in Japan. The town's seawall, built to withstand tsunamis up to 10 meters, offered no real defense. Water crashed over the top, carrying entire fishing boats, cars, and debris far beyond the harbor. Residents who had once trusted concrete barriers watched as the ocean rose above rooftops, swallowing blocks in seconds. The force of the waves snapped steel, uprooted trees, and erased familiar streets. Survivors described a deafening roar, a wall of water that seemed to defy imagination. For those on higher ground, the only option was to watch as the flood swept inland, leaving nothing but fragments in its wake. The sheer height and power of the tsunami rendered decades of engineering obsolete in an instant, exposing the limits of human preparation against the raw force of nature. 40 minutes after the ground stopped shaking, a different kind of disaster swept across the Sendai Plain. The tsunami did not simply batter the coast and retreat. Instead, the water surged over fields and highways, swallowing entire neighborhoods as it pressed inland. In Sendai, the wave traveled up to 10 kilometers from the shoreline, moving with such force that even those who had evacuated to what they thought were safe areas found themselves trapped. The landscape, once flat and orderly, became a chaotic inland sea, dotted with floating debris, cars, and the rooftops of houses torn from their foundations. Survivors watched from upper floors and distant hills as the water erased roads, rice paddies, and landmarks in minutes. A Sendai resident later recalled, "We waited for the water to stop, but it kept coming, further and further. There was nowhere left to run." The flood's reach was so vast that it confounded rescue teams who struggled to locate the boundaries between land and sea. What began as a coastal disaster had now become an inland crisis, stretching the limits of response and leaving entire communities isolated by water. At 3:37 in the afternoon, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant lost all power. The tsunami, measuring more than 14 meters high, swept over the seawall and flooded the backup diesel generators. These generators, installed just 10 meters above sea level, had been intended as a final line of defense. Once submerged, every cooling system at the plant failed. Within minutes, the control rooms went dark. Operators relied on flashlights and handwritten notes as alarms signaled rising temperatures inside the reactors. Plant manager Masao Yoshida faced a crisis with no precedent. The emergency procedures he had drilled for years did not account for a complete station blackout, no electricity, no pumps, no way to circulate water through the reactor cores. As the pressure mounted, Yoshida made a decision that would later define the disaster response. He ordered his team to begin injecting seawater into Unit 1, defying instructions from Tokyo headquarters. The risk was enormous. Salt water could ruin the reactor, but doing nothing meant certain meltdown. By the evening of March 11th, the situation had spiraled beyond control. Without cooling, fuel rods in Units 1, 2, and 3 began to overheat. Hydrogen built up inside the reactor buildings, setting the stage for explosions in the coming days. The International Atomic Energy Agency would later classify Fukushima as a Level 7 event, the highest category on the nuclear accident scale. What began as a power failure had now become a cascading catastrophe, forcing the evacuation of tens of thousands and transforming the plant into a symbol of technological vulnerability. Grief spread across the Tohoku region as the numbers came into focus. Official records confirmed 15,899 lives lost and 2,526 still missing, their fates swallowed by the sea. The scale of loss defied comprehension. Whole families vanished, and communities were left searching for names that would never appear on any list. Public health investigators later traced a second wave of tragedy. More than 3,700 deaths were linked not to the earthquake or tsunami itself, but to the ordeal that followed, the exhaustion of evacuation, the trauma of displacement, and the silent toll of stress in overcrowded shelters. Elderly survivors, uprooted from their homes and cut off from medical care, often succumbed to illness or despair in the weeks and months after the disaster. Economists struggled to capture the full extent of the damage. The World Bank placed the total cost at $235 billion, making it the most expensive natural disaster ever recorded. Factories that powered global supply chains stood silent. In the automotive and electronic sectors, assembly lines from Japan to Europe ground to a halt as parts from the Tohoku region stopped arriving. The financial aftershocks rippled outward, touching businesses and households across continents. For many in Japan, the day shattered a deeply held trust in the nation's preparedness. The belief that modern engineering and careful planning could keep disaster at bay, known as Anzan Shinwa, collapsed alongside seawalls and reactors. In its place grew a new sense of vulnerability and a reckoning with the limits of human control. A generation later, over 30,000 people remain displaced, proof that the disaster's shadow outlasts the headlines. As climate extremes and seismic threats grow worldwide, Japan's experience is now a global warning. The unimaginable can happen, and resilience demands constant vigilance. What lessons will we act on before the next wave strikes?